Goalpost Studios in downtown East Lansing, Michigan,
Hello and welcome to the Earn More, Keep More show.
where it's our job to give you tips, tricks, and strategies to earn more and keep more. I'm Dave McAndrews, and I believe that we should focus our marketing on messages that are all about our clients so that we can connect with them in a way that they can understand.
And I'm Matt Love, and I believe in being efficient with our companies so that we are able to keep more of what we make.
Me up beautifully, and that's why I stay plugged in and I always contribute to my community.
Dave, did you know that 87% of all statistics are made up?
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
I took a statistics class in grad school, and that's about what I learned. Actually, what I learned was that basically you can make statistics say just about anything you wanted them to say.
You really can. That's the fun part. In my practice, I do financial planning. I help people make financial decisions, and I've never had more fun than what I've been doing lately. And part of it, I want to talk about that today. So I've been doing financial planning and stuff for about 8 or 9 years. And when I got into the business, I was in my late 20s. Most of my friends had college loans. And if they didn't have college loans or student loans, they at least were trying to buy a house. So they were getting into a mortgage, and they didn't know what type of mortgage they should get into. 15-year, 30-year, is a fixed better than an ARM, those types of questions. So I made it a point to make debt an integral part of the conversations that I had with clients, because how we pay for our debt will influence how much wealth we're able to accumulate over our lifetime.
So both of those types of debt that you just mentioned, the student loan, the home debt,
Yeah.
so that was ingrained in me in a relatively early age, that those were possibly good debt types.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas, the credit card debt, that's the big, nasty, scary type versus, basically taking debt from a loan shark where he threatens to cut off one of your hands.
Yeah.
That would be the scariest type of debt. But when you're dealing with these different types of debts, how do you see them break down, or does that matter?
Absolutely. There's a hierarchy when it comes to debt. I call it the good, the bad, and the ugly. And some debt can help us get ahead, and some debt is always going to hurt us. Now, if you listen to a lot of the financial...
Like Guido.
Exactly, like Guido. Take your hands away if you don't pay him.
Yeah.
That stuff's serious. If you listen to a lot of the financial entertainers out there, they might have a differing opinion than I do, which is totally fine. I believe there's a huge market in the United States that needs to understand how to pay off a credit card. Once you pay off the credit card and you start building some money into a savings account, then what? See, the problem with typical financial planning and the problem with the advice that we get from these financial institutions is that they don't follow their own rules. When you go to a bank and get a mortgage, they'll say, look, here's a 30-year mortgage and you'll pay X amount of money into interest. Or look at this, if you've got a 15-year mortgage, you're going to pay much less in interest.
You know what makes me twitchy?
What's that?
Talking about mortgages.
That's interesting. Tell me why.
My very first house that I bought straight out of college was 2001, and I bought it in downtown West Palm Beach. All I knew about real estate at that time from everybody that I talked to in South Florida is essentially buy something, it will always go up in value, and if you put money into real estate, you will make money.
Yeah, how'd that work out for you?
So I still have that particular house. It's a it's a 2-bedroom. It's a rental, and maybe possibly by the end of next month or so, I'm actually going to have that sold.
Wow.
And it will be sold after everything is said and done. It's probably going to be a wash.
Wow.
That was my first foray into real estate. My second one, which was buying a beautiful townhouse in 2007, is really the one that broke my relationship with the mortgage industry.
Well, when did the housing market kind of take a dive?
That was 2008.
So right after you made the purchase.
Yeah, it just happened to coincide.
Wow.
I bought a townhouse in West Palm Beach for $300,000.
How much could you have bought that townhouse for in 2009?
Well, 2009, I could have bought it for $70,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
$300,000 down to $70,000
Yeah.
in value.
And my relationship to mortgages at that time was one where, you had signed a contract. And that contract was, your word was your bond. So I drug that albatross with me for.
How did you get approved for that mortgage? A pulse?
Yes.
Basically.
I had a pulse. I remember very specifically, and this should have been a glaring red flag, and that was, I can't believe the bank gave us that much money.
That's a tough lesson, isn't it?
Yeah, that one smarted. So as you can see, I have a little bit of scar tissue built up around the whole concept of debt and mortgage and
Now let me ask
everything
you a
else.
question, Dave. If I gave you $300,000 and you put nothing into that condo, you walked away in 2007 with a condo that I paid for that you own.
Do I like you?
That's a very good question. Let's say you have no real relationship with me. No, yeah, you don't really care. You don't like me. Do you care if the value of that condo goes from 300 to 70?
Again, the wiring in my head is I have to care it because I own it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is what I was saying in the beginning too. How we pay off these debts will influence and is directly correlated with how much wealth we're going to be able to accumulate over our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So while you experienced some of the worst real estate ups and downs that we've seen, gosh, in my lifetime, you literally bought at the worst time. And do you still have that condo right now?
No, I finally got that sold back in 2012 after just eating it for 4 years or so.
Wow. That is a lesson learned.
Yes, my balls are still sore.
Yeah, that's horrible. So when we talk about how to get a mortgage to pay for those things, banks will tell us, if you get a smaller mortgage, a shorter term, then you're going to save a lot of money in interest. But here's a good question. Can you deduct the interest on your mortgage?
Why, yes, you can.
Yes, you can. So the interest rate that they give us really isn't even the true rate that we pay. We're paying them a smaller rate after we deduct the interest. The cost is much less.
My roots are deep in the soil.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Good, the bad, and the ugly. And understanding the ugly debt versus the good debt is going to be a difference in your life of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of wealth that you'll be able to accumulate. Let me give you an example. Bad debt. There's a lot of financial entertainers out there that talk about this kind of stuff. And I want to make a disclaimer here. This is not a blanket suggestion for everybody. My role really is just to educate you on how people do things and what happens if you were to do something. So it's not a suggestion of doing anything. But when it comes to credit cards, extremely high interest rates, revolving debt, really bad for your credit score if you want to get a loan for something like a car or a house. So a credit card would be considered bad debt, right? That's the ugly, actually. That's like the worst of the worst. Bad debt, boat loan. I want to use somebody else's money to go buy a boat, a depreciating asset. Usually it's a shorter loan term, so the
So you
payments
want
are
to
real
use
high.
other people's money to buy a boat as well as other people's boats. I find that to be the better option.
Well, if we're going to do, let's do that. If you're going to do a boat, I would just use other people's boats. I would search that,
Fantastic.
go on Craigslist and look for other people's boats. That's the best investment. But for
I just want a buddy's boat.
Yeah,
That's
but-
all I want.
absolutely.
I want you to get a boat on Walloon, and then I'll go hang out on that.
Gas is very expensive. I have a T-shirt in the summertime I wear with my friends. My boat runs on gas, not thanks.
Very nice.
Yeah, so you'll have to bring some gas money when you come up. But when it comes to car loans, the same thing. Car loans usually have a short repayment term, but at least I'm not giving my valuable dollar, my today's dollar, away to go buy a depreciating asset. At least I can use somebody else's. So I consider that kind of bad, but it's kind of good too. And we'll get into the idea of inflation here in a minute, but then an idea of good debt would be two things, really. Student loans and mortgages. And here's why. I can go very long on a mortgage, and I can go fairly long on a student loan. Relatively low interest rates, and to a certain extent, the government subsidizes that debt. Another way of saying the interest that you pay on that loan is deductible. So if I'm paying 5% on my mortgage, after I deduct it, really I'm only paying like 3.5%, maybe 4%, depending on the tax bracket that I'm in. Student loans, same thing. Now, to be an attorney, to be a physician, usually we have to go into debt to finish school. It could be 6 figures worth of loans. If you have 6 figures worth of loans and you went to school for basket weaving, I don't think you're going to have an easy time paying off that debt because the income isn't there. When student loans become a good thing is when you go into debt to get a degree, it's almost like a guaranteed paycheck when you get out of school. A physician most likely is going to be paid better than most, and they will have the ability to repay that student debt. How they repay it now will affect how much wealth they have in the future.
So let's, because obviously this is kind of our target market, the the physician type.
Yeah.
Okay, so the physician, the lawyer, those types of people who now are going into practice and they're starting to make good money. And a lot of those folks that I work with, they find themselves incentivized to go ahead and retire that debt versus maybe putting some of that money into growing their practice or something like that. So what are your thoughts on that? Where should their money be going?
I think this is the anti-typical financial advice that most advisors give. But I believe that you are your number one asset, and you need to invest in yourself first and nothing less. That's why you went into debt in the first place, because you believed in your ability to get a college degree and get a career that pays well. Do not use your dollars today, the most valuable dollars you'll have, to pay off a loan that doesn't have to be repaid. Pay yourself first. Real quick, there's a principle called solvency. Most business owners understand this, and that idea is this. If I owe $100,000 and I have $100,000 in an uncorrelated asset, I could pay off my debt at any time I wanted to. That's called solvency.
Do you think most business owners actually understand that?
You know, the truth be told, probably not. The most successful business owners, absolutely, because they understand this principle of using other people's money to get ahead.
But the audience, the general audience of business people,
Yeah.
we're talking about what I find the most in clients that I have and people who talk to me on a regular basis. They're experts in a very particular area.
Yeah.
And then they go into business.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a pretty good chance that they're not a business person going into business.
Very
and,
fair.
And when that happens, you know, the idea of solvency, that's a foreign concept, because that's nothing that, you know, you talk to a doctor. You know, I have a lot of friends who are doctors, but I also have a saying that I know a lot of good doctors and I know a lot of good business people. They just don't live in the same body.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from that standpoint, I don't think that the majority of business owners probably have that understanding of having $100,000 in debt and then having $100,000 in that liquid.
Yeah.
They like the liquid. They want to have more of that, but they don't necessarily understand the balance between.
I think that's probably an accurate statement. And again, I think it comes down to nobody teaches these principles. It's something that's learned over time.
Certainly not in medical school.
Definitely not in medical school. But here's the idea for everyone listening. If you so let's say there's two people. Person A has $100,000 in the bank. Person B has a $100,000 asset, like a house. Okay? That asset is illiquid. They cannot pull the money out of it. Person A, who has $100,000 in cash, also has a $100,000 mortgage.
But wait a second, my house just went up 20%.
Great. If you want to get a rate of return, do you want to use your money or somebody else's money to get it?
Preferably somebody else's money.
Why not use somebody else's?
Mm-hmm.
A quick question. Does Donald Trump use his own money when he builds all of his skyscrapers?
He certainly uses his own name.
That's true. He's not using his own money. If the investment does well, he gets the rate of return. Okay? He's going to pay a little bit of an interest rate to use other people's money for those buildings. But he's the one getting the real rate of return. That's why his lobbies are gold. If the investment does poorly, his business does poorly. We've all understood that Donald Trump has been bankrupt 7 times. Personally, he didn't really go bankrupt. His businesses went bankrupt. Why? Because he didn't put his assets at risk. So going back to my example, person A here has a $100,000 house and a $100,000 mortgage, okay? But they also have $100,000 in the bank versus person B who has $100,000 in the house. Whose net worth is higher?
The guy with cash.
I would argue the guy with cash. On paper, according to a bank, the net worth is exactly the same. Isn't that funny? Now, let's say 2008 happens again. Not if, when 2008 happens again, and the housing market gets cut in half. Person B's mortgage doesn't exist, right? He's got $100,000 in the house, but the house is only worth $50,000 now. Person A, who has the $100,000 mortgage, has $100,000 in the bank. That dude can go buy 2 houses on his street without even going to getting the bank's approval.
Where exactly were you 11 years ago?
I love when people say
this conversation would have been really helpful when I was buying South Florida real estate.
Yeah, that probably got hit the hardest amongst most of the real estate in the country.
We were right behind Las Vegas, so
Nice.
so it was Las Vegas, West Palm Beach. So
Yeah.
you know, We were second to last.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't this amazing? Because think about this. As the housing market gets cut in half, person A can take his family out to dinner. They're enjoying their lifestyle. They got a good job still. They can call the bank and say, look at Mr. Banker, you lent me $100,000 on a house that's worth $50,000. How are you feeling? Because if that were me, I'd be sleeping pretty rough at night.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be able to go to bed knowing that I owe twice something that's actually worth. I'm thinking about sending you the keys because I didn't go lose any money in this transaction. Sure, my credit might be taking a hit, but here's the good news. I got cash. I was solvent. I had the value of my mortgage in an uncorrelated asset that's liquid. And my neighbor, he lost his job. I can go buy his house right now and then rent it out to him because he needs the money today. I wrote a book on this subject. It's called Don't Be Debt-Free and Broke. It's on Amazon.com. It's cheap. I don't even know how much it is, but there's colored graphs on there. I go over what type of mortgages do what, how much interest costs actually are, how banks make money. Banks make massive rates of return by using other people's money strategically. Let's say you want to go buy a mortgage. So you go to a bank downtown. When a bank lends you that money to go buy the house, are they using their money or someone else's?
They're using my money.
They're using their own money.
That I put in there, yeah.
They're not using their assets. Look, we got a billionaire in Donald Trump who's very vocal that he's not using his own money to buy these skyscrapers. We have banks that we know are not using their assets to lend out. Last time I checked, banks have all the big buildings and we have all the little buildings. What do they know that we don't?
I don't know. Donald Trump's smarter than we are. He has the best words.
Well, just ask him, he'll tell you, right? But the truth is that the banks use these principles that they don't teach us. They teach us the opposite of what they do. And it's not the banker's fault, right? It's not, if you have a good relationship with the bank downtown, that's cool. It's not their fault. The people behind the people at the front desk at the bank downtown, those are the ones that know what they're doing. They are utilizing principles that they will never teach the public. Because if they taught the public how to be independent of the banks, we would never use them. They teach us how to be dependent on them. So why would they teach us the principles they use to get ahead?
I think back in my own financial upbringing and things like credit score, like the idea, I struggled with it for 5 years on how to get rid of this underwater asset. And the bank pushed me to the point where I had been paying the mortgage the entire time, and I had to stop paying the mortgage in order for them to allow me to short sell it.
Isn't that horrible?
That was the only way that it would work. And I had it so ingrained in my mind that you had to have a great credit score in order to do, stuff like I'm doing today, where I'm able to leverage wealth to build businesses and do all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That I ate thousands and thousands of dollars over that 5 years that I just lost.
Yeah.
And it was all coming down to the fact that I was afraid of taking the credit hit because I had fantastic credit, and I didn't want to go backwards, and I didn't want to be seen as someone who did not play by the rules or honor his word in the form of a mortgage contract.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you would have showed up in 2008, that would have been really freaking helpful.
It would have been different, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Regardless of the times, the message has never changed. Mm-hmm. That's the part that's crazy to me. And as the world changes, we could reevaluate these ideas. I think back of my dad's house in the early 80s, it was a 16% mortgage. That's a huge, huge interest rate. It might make sense to pay off that loan. But look at the world back then. CDs were paying 9%.
Yeah, now you're lucky if you get one.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So everything is relative. If a CD was paying 1 and the stock market's averaging 4 and you're paying a 16% mortgage, we're going to pay off that mortgage.
Sure.
But at a 5% mortgage,
that's credit card rates, right?
You got it. At 5% right now, it's some of the most historically low interest rates we've seen in our lifetime. Guaranteed never to change for 30 years, where the government will subsidize it, meaning allow you to deduct that interest rate. Why would I take today's most valuable dollars and pay off an asset where the asset's value
so
has
real quick,
nothing to do?
You've said this a couple of times now. Today's most valuable dollars. Yeah. Just go into that concept a little bit.
Okay, real quick. Hopefully most of the people listening understand what inflation means. But if you don't, inflation means this. If I have $10 in 1980 and I went downtown and bought groceries, I would buy a lot more groceries in 1980 with the same $10 that I would today. Today, $10 is not going to buy as many groceries as it did 30 years ago. Make sense?
Yeah.
Another way of saying that is $10 today. If I go shopping, I'm going to buy more groceries today than I would 30 years from now.
Right.
So my dollar's value is deflating. Listeners, do we realize we now are legally have the right to pay back a bank with dollars that are worth less, not worthless, worth less 30 years from now than they are today. So my $1,000 mortgage payment is going to feel like $400 or $500.
Yeah. Again, 2008, that would have been helpful for me. But
Where were you?
Yeah, hopefully there are some folks in the audience that this really connects with, because I think it is critically important. I mean,
But here, let me make a disclaimer here real quick too. And the whole purpose of this is not to say, look, go long on your debt, pay minimal payments to the institutions, and then go buy that purse that you always wanted. It's not that. It's put your dollars to work for you today efficiently. Get rid of risk. Get rid of things that you can control. Get rid of asset management fees. Get rid of market volatility. Get rid of taxes strategically. Strategically get rid of these things that you can control. Put your dollars for work for you, and use other people's money to buy things like your house. Get this. If your house goes up in value, does that have anything to do with whether or not there's a mortgage?
absolutely not.
Why wouldn't I use the bank's money to go buy the house if it goes up? Cool, I get it. Not the bank. I get that equity.
Absolutely.
If it goes down, the bank lost value, and I still have access to my cash because it's uncorrelated.
Can I make a confession?
Uh-oh, I don't know what kind of show we have going on here, Dan. What do you got?
So my confession is, in my very first career out of college, I was a high school teacher.
Cool.
I was a high school teacher, and I taught history and economics. And whenever we talk about this particular topic, and you and I have had some of these conversations before, I think I did those kids a little bit of a disservice in the economics class.
Really? But in what sense? What did you teach?
From the sense that I was really good at hitting the macro,
Yeah.
and I was really good at explaining the system. Like, this is how the system works.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, it's like everything that I do now is about how we can focus on making the system work for us, rather than turning ourselves into a cow in the farm of life, so that somebody can milk us for our entire lives.
Man, you said it perfectly, and I think you hit the nail on the head. And this is why I think you and I wanted to do this and have these conversations, and eventually get outside entrepreneurs to call in and teach us about problems that they didn't know that existed in their world. But, you and I, when we started this, our whole goal is to show people the problems that they are completely unaware of. We don't know what we don't know. And the purpose of this whole thing is to talk about just basic concepts of economics and principles. How do I earn more? How do I grow my business? And at the same time, how do I spend less on what I'm already doing? And it's just understanding the rule of the game. Imagine trying to play chess without understanding the rules. Well, that's what we do all day long in the financial world. No one sits down and teaches us, how much do I save? How much do I put in a retirement account? How much do I put towards my mortgage? Well, I know I'm supposed to be debt-free, but am I really? Because is that going to hurt my wealth in the future?
But Dave Ramsey told me to.
Oh, my gosh. I love Dave Ramsey. Have you seen his new building? It's massive. I don't know how I call him a financial entertainer. He does it for the people, folks. He does it for the people. Go look at his building. It's beautiful. He can fit half of our listeners in that one building, I'm sure. And Dave isn't wrong. Again, Dave is very good for 60, 70% of the population.
Right, because again, what your message is there's a good, bad, and ugly.
Totally, and he's teaching to get rid of that ugly debt.
Right.
Yeah.
So his focus for the majority of his listeners and the folks who espouse the gospel by Dave Ramsey are really focusing in on, how do I get rid of the ugly?
You got it.
But it goes further into, you got to pay off that house next.
Yeah.
And that's when it gets a little bit interesting.
I love the message that he gives when he tells people to pay off their bad debt, their credit cards, and to save money in their savings account. But he advocates for $1,000. I advocate for a third of your annual income should be in a bank. A lot of people can't get there, and they definitely don't get there overnight. It's a goal. It's what we're striving towards. I could prove Dave Ramsey, I look at it, there's half of what he does is really, really good, and then maybe the other half I just kind of question. He talks about a 12% mutual fund. I've never seen a mutual fund that does 12% consistently over and over, year after year. I'm going to prove Dave Ramsey wrong in 2 minutes. Ready? Get a pen. If anyone's listening, get a pen. You have he advocates for paying off your mortgage. So he says, if you get a $200,000 mortgage and you have a 30-year loan, you're going to pay $184,000 in interest. That's money you'll never get back, folks. Truth is, that's not the end of the story. Because if I
gotta sound more folksy when you're doing.
yeah, I don't have that southern drawl.
Yeah.
He's got that drawl. So he teaches that you're going to lose $184,000, but in the next sentence, he says you can earn 12% in a mutual fund. Guys, go online.
I'm gonna say what?
Yeah, go online and get a future value calculator. Put $200,000 in the present value. Do a 12% interest rate for 30 years. What's the value of that account?
$11 million.
11 trillion million. No, it's a lot. It's like almost $10 million. So what he's saying is save $184,000 of interest that you're going to lose and get rid of the 11 million that you could have earned if you put it in that same mutual fund I talk about in the next show. It's amazing. And you know what? When it comes down to it, Dave gets paid by all these financial institutions that make these widgets. So that's how he's affording all these big buildings.
It'd be fun to invent a Dave Ramsey drinking game. That would be a good time.
What are the rules? How would you play it?
The rules would be, everybody, every time you get congratulated for paying off a debt, then you take a shot.
Take a shot?
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be
a hell of a thing.
Be a lot of broke drunk people, I'll tell you that.
Well, we'll have to come up with our own drinking game for the next episode.
That's right. You can learn a lot of these principles that I talk about in the book, Don't Be Debt Free and Broke. It's on Amazon. It's an easy read.
Here's the takeaway.
Back to the New Year's resolution, how to earn more, keep more. What is something that our listeners can really do to bring application to this?
Absolutely. Very simple. Put your debt in hierarchy. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And it goes like this. Best debt, mortgages. Worst debt, credit cards. Cars, right in the middle towards the bottom. Yeah, depending on what you drive, in the middle somewhere.
What about a Jaguar F-Type?
Jaguar F-Type I consider a very good debt. Only if it's the R model, which is the V8 550 horsepower, 500.
Which you will find on the homepage of the Earn More, Keep More .show. Go there and you can see that.
Absolutely.
That
and if your advisor is not teaching you how to drive your retirement plan, you have a lot to learn by listening to this show. I think we could have a big impact in your world. But yes, I would say put your debt in a hierarchy from the good and the bad. If you need help, go online. We'll have resources on the website that will help you organize all that stuff.
Fantastic. And let's also give a takeaway because we talked a little bit about the different levels of debt, and we got into versus Dave Ramsey and doing all that kind of stuff, and talking about killing off that bad debt. Is there anything that we can kind of underline and highlight for our audience, really geared at the business owner, the executive, the folks who are a little, they've gotten through that initial plateau of their career and have started moving up the mountain and accumulating wealth? What does that look like for them? My
goodness, this never changes. Principles never change. Methods will always change. The number one principle for anyone, whether you're a business owner or a young kid starting out, pay yourself first. Put your money to work for yourself. And I don't care if it's in a bank account. Just have it liquid so that you can access it when the opportunity comes. They call it a rainy day fund. I call it an opportunity fund. When something happens, you have the opportunity to take advantage of that. You guys know when a 0% rate of return is a good thing? A savings account right now is paying almost a 0% rate of return. A 0% rate of return is a great thing when the stock market goes down 20%. If the housing market drops 30%, your money in your bank is doing better than had you paid off that mortgage or had you had the money inside the stock market.
That's so true. And you're saying for the business owner to really focus in on paying themselves first. That's hard to do as a business owner a lot of times, especially because Jenny over there, our executive producer, she's who I pay first.
Absolutely.
Because she makes me look good.
Yes.
But changing that focus a little bit while making sure that you have, obviously, the cash flow in order to operate your company is critical to growing a business.
It's massive, and so is building a really good team. So all of these go in conjunction, and we'll talk about that too, the value of a team that understands your beliefs and why you exist in a business. That it is invaluable. But when it comes to investing in what you do with your money, seriously, pay yourself first until you have a bunch of money in a savings account. Then, when the time is right, you'll know what the next right decision is. And if you need help, we'd be happy to help you. But number one, pay yourself. Keep control over your cash.
Go to the website, earnmorekeepmore.show, and we're going to have a downloadable hierarchy that you can basically print out and start scribbling in what the hierarchy of debt that you have, and start bringing a little bit of clarity to the good, the bad, the ugly of your debt situation.
Drop the mic.
Matt, we just turned the calendar from 18 to 19, and whenever that happens, once a year we have an opportunity, and that opportunity is to really focus in and make some decisions about our lives and make resolutions. And the resolution that I would be honored if everybody who's out there listening could go and really take to heart and start thinking about in a really serious way is the resolution to earn more and keep more.
Absolutely. You know, there's only two ways to increase your business. The first way is to increase your sales. Everybody knows this. Increasing your sales is hard to do. It might mean you spend more money. It might mean you take more risk. You have to change some things to increase the level of production that you're creating. The only other way to increase your business is to reduce the cost it took you to get there. So in your resolutions, there's one of two things you should be focusing on. How are you going to get to the next level as far as sales go? And given the sales that you've already made, how can you reduce your cost?
Let's do it. Let's get out there and earn more and keep more.
This has been a Goalpost production.
That's it for us. We are your hosts, Dave McAndrews and Matt Love. Our executive producer and creative guru is Jennifer McKinstry. Our social media director is Mark Farnes. And a very special thank you to Lansing's own Jose Moore for providing the music.
Thanks for listening.